If your XTHP hydraulic hand pump is having issues holding pressure, using the XTHP Replacement Parts Kit and some simple hand tools, you can service the pump in the field and get up and running again in a few minutes. If the pressure reading drops after pumping the XTHP, the internal temperature and ambient temperature may be equalizing, causing these readings to change. This is more likely to happen in colder environments and after a minute or two should begin to stabilize. If your XTHP is dropping pressure quickly and does not stabilize, or you're having issues priming the pump, that may mean the vent valve is not closed tightly. Tighten the valve until it cannot be turned anymore. If that doesn't help, it may be that an O-ring seal or internal check valve needs to be replaced. Let's go over how to check and replace the internal check valves and O-ring seals on the XTHP pump. To inspect the inlet check valve, start by draining any fluid you have in the pump reservoir. Using a 1/2-inch wrench, remove the priming piston body. Be careful when removing the primer piston assembly because the poppet and small spring inside the assembly is easy to lose if you're out in the field. Once disassembled, we can see the spring and poppet in the check valve. Make sure the spring is clear of any debris and in proper working order. If the spring is bent or broken, you can replace it with a new one from the Ralston XTHP Replacement Parts Kit. Also inspect the O-ring seal to make sure it's clear of any debris. Ensure the O-ring sealing surface of the pump body is clear of debris. After inspecting, apply some lubricant to the seals and place the poppet into the valve, O-ring side toward the primer body. Then place the spring back inside, making sure it's straight. If the spring is crooked, the O-ring will not properly seal and possibly be damaged, so it's essential to have this spring straight. Snug up the primer assembly with a 1/2-inch wrench, enough to engage the O-ring seals, being careful not to over-tighten. Once that's together, we can put the primer assembly back into the pump body and test the pump to ensure it's holding pressure. To replace the priming piston seal, start by using 2 1/2-inch wrenches. Put one wrench on the priming piston body and the other on the bonnet to remove the priming piston from the body. Inspect the seals on the pumping piston. If there's any damage to this seal, there's a replacement seal in the XTHP Replacement Parts Kit. Apply a light amount of silicone lubricant to the O-ring seals. Carefully put the priming piston back into the priming piston body. Tighten the bonnet onto the priming piston body with 2 1/2-inch wrenches, being careful not to over-tighten. If the pump is still losing pressure, you may need to replace the outlet port check valve or O-rings. First, we'll remove the reservoir vent plug and the cap and chain on the outlet port. Make sure to drain any liquid in the reservoir. With a 3/4-inch wrench, remove the nut and washer on top of the reservoir. Then, remove the reservoir. Using a 1/2-inch wrench, remove the outlet port stem. Turn the pump over and slowly remove the spring and poppet inside the pump body. Here we can inspect the O-ring to ensure there's no debris around the O-ring. Again, inspect the poppet to make sure the valve is not bulging and the poppet is sitting flat from the valve. If needed, replace the poppet with a new one from the XTHP Replacement Parts Kit and apply lubricant to the seals. Before reassembling, apply some light industrial oil to the seals and inspect the port O-ring. Clean the pump body port with a Q-tip or swab if necessary. Insert the poppet into the pump body with the O-ring side facing down. Using a guide such as an Allen wrench or paper clip, insert the spring into the poppet, ensuring that it is seated correctly. Making sure the spring is straight, reinstall the gauge stem into the pump body. Snug up the outlet port stem with a 1/2-inch wrench. Do not over-tighten the outlet port as you may damage the O-ring seals. Next, install the reservoir. This needs to be assembled carefully to avoid damaging the O-rings. Lubricate the large O-rings with light industrial oil and make sure the label is oriented so it can be read while holding the pump upright. The larger diameter of the reservoir should be facing down. Then slowly twist the reservoir back and forth as you are pushing down onto it. It should slowly work its way onto the O-ring. To install the lid, make sure to lubricate the upper O-ring and slowly twist the lid until it's installed. If the lid is difficult to assemble, you can use the nut without the washer and a 3/4-inch wrench to help draw the lid down. Next, put the washer and nut back on top of our outlet port and snug it up with a 3/4-inch wrench. Do not over-tighten this, as over-tightening could damage the top O-ring. Put the cap and chain back on and replace the vent plug. After the pump is reassembled, we can apply some pressure to ensure all of our O-rings and check valves are functioning as intended. To repair the fine adjust valve, use 2 1/2-inch wrenches. Put one wrench on the fine adjust body and the other on the bonnet, and loosen the fine adjust. There are 2 pieces. The first is the piston in the body, where there are 2 O-rings. Inspect these and remove any debris. If the O-ring needs to be replaced, use seals from the XTHP Replacement Parts Kit. Install the white PTFE backup ring first, then the O-ring. Apply silicone grease to the seals and replace them in the housing. Snug up the valve with 2 1/2-inch wrenches and test the pump to ensure it's holding pressure. To remove the valve body from the pump, use a 1/2-inch wrench and remove the bleed valve. Inspect the O-ring seals and make sure they are clear of any debris. If O-rings need to be replaced, use the replacement seals from the XTHP Replacement Parts Kit. Be careful when removing this valve, as there's a steel ball bearing inside of the valve that is easy to lose. Make sure the ball bearing and O-rings are clear of any debris, apply some light lubricant, and reinstall back into the pump. If the valve body seal needs to be replaced, use a replacement seal from the XTHP Replacement Parts Kit. To replace the bleed valve, make sure the bleed valve is untethered by turning the valve knob counterclockwise all the way until it stops. Apply some light industrial oil to the seals and reinstall the bleed valve back onto the pump. Snug up the valve with a 1/2-inch wrench, enough to engage the seal to the pump body, but not over tightening to where we damage the seal. To tighten the bonnet onto the valve body, use 2 1/2-inch wrenches, one holding the body and one holding the bonnet. To disassemble and replace the pumping piston O-ring and backup ring, we'll need to remove the handle assembly. First, remove the 4 bolts on the bottom of the pump using a 5/32 or 4mm Allen wrench. Remove the handle assembly from the pump. Squeeze the handles, and here is the piston with the white backup ring and O-ring. Inspect these seals for any damage, and if necessary, use new ones from the XTHP Replacement Parts Kit. Make sure the seals have a small amount of silicone grease applied, and we can move onto the piston cylinder. Here we have the piston cylinder. Also, inspect the white backup ring and O-ring, and replace if damaged. Make sure these seals have a small amount of lubricant applied, and place the piston cylinder over the pumping piston. Reinstall the handles into the pump body using the 4 screws and the 5/32 or 4mm Allen wrench. To learn how to prime the XTHP and perform a test on a system, check out our operation video. For more information about our hydraulic hand pumps and other products, check out our website at ralstonInst.com.